Yes, well, as you see, they feel that they own the planet, and so they're very alarmed. I mean, wouldn't you be if it were your property? And say, my God, what is going on? We have to get hold of the neighborhood. But my faith is that the horse knows where it wants to go, and we're all being carried along for the ride. And, you know, Mitsubishi, the Catholic Church, whoever wants to try and control it is welcome to try. But it's a perverse thing. I mean, we who think of ourselves as little people imagine that owning the earth must be a great pleasure. But actually, you know, the number of ulcer tablets being consumed in the chancelleries, bourses, and embassies of this planet seems to argue that thinking you own the world is an enormous headache and aggravation. The chaos is roving through the system and able to undo at any point the best laid plans. All kinds of things are happening. First of all, there are all these fields of research ranging from cryogenics, nanotechnology, psychedelic pharmacology, disease control, machine-human interfacing. You know, you could just list these things endlessly. And at any moment, one of these fields could make a breakthrough so fundamental that everything would be changed. And we have, you know, 50 of these irons going in the fire all the time. At the same time, because the planetary culture is becoming ever more closely knitted together, all its parts are becoming codependent. So, for instance, an earthquake which destroys central Tokyo would ruin the economy of Belgium, because the retraction of Japanese capital from world markets would set up reverberations that would be felt everywhere. The system is being slaved ever more tightly to various portions of itself. Crop failure in Russia causes, you know, strikes in Argentina and so forth and so on. And this will accelerate. Well, then the task of management somehow is to bring this coalescing system through this transition period without the whole thing getting so much vibration built up into it that it falls apart. And so it's very alarming to see barbarism uncontrolled in the world, to see, you know, people being pushed into boxcars on their way to extermination camps and all this. This means that that the global control systems are in danger of breaking down. And I think that the world corporate state is running hard to keep up. National governments do not understand what is going on. National governments are underpaid, understaffed, and under-talented. World corporate divisions of various sorts do understand what is going on, but they are in the process of taking power from the national states as rapidly as possible in order to use that power to manage the planet in a somewhat less ideologically hysterical fashion. I mean, they want to make money, you know, but that's a different thing than wanting to convert everybody to Islam, Marxism, or National Socialism, or something like that. I'm fascinated by management because it's the large-scale understanding and integration of human systems. And that's the real challenge. I mean, it's all very fine to take these mathematical models and write and describe the behavior of the dripping faucet, as was done very creatively. But the purpose of all this modeling is to eventually take control of our own relationships to each other and to the world and to the future and to the future generations.
It's somewhat paradoxical, though, because management would appear to be key, yet what we're talking about managing can't be managed.
No, but what can be managed is our anxiety about it. In other words, I think of it as though what we're in is an aircraft, a cultural airfoil moving through history. And the challenge is change your Sopwith Camel into an F-18 in flight, because we're going faster and faster and faster, and Q forces, vibration, are beginning to build up on all the airfoils. And so what we have to do is transform the cultural engine, or the forward acceleration into the temporal medium will burn the wings off and rip the airfoil apart.
What you're talking about is metamorphosis. Would you comment on examples of metamorphosis in nature to what's going on there?
Well, the perfect example is, of course, insect metamorphosis, which if you read my book, the True Hallucinations, and I think it's mentioned in The Invisible Landscape, there was a great deal of talk about insect metamorphosis at La Chorrera. I've always, and I've never received a satisfactory answer to the question put to evolutionary biologists, how do you account for the metamorphosis of insects, where, like in the case of butterflies, hundreds, if not thousands of genes have to be coordinated perfectly to take a caterpillar, dissolve all its body tissue, and have it completely reconstruct itself as another kind of organism. I'm trying to imagine an evolutionary scenario of gradual mutation that would give you that. I can't do it. It must have happened largely instantaneously in a single massive rearrangement of hundreds and hundreds of genes. And we don't see that much in animal life. We see large-scale polyploidy in plants. So maybe this happened in animal tissue only once or twice in the life of the planet. But it gave this insect adaptation, which is astonishing, you know. And in a way, what we're doing is repeating that metamorphosis on a metaphorical as well as physical plane. I mean, we are rather like worms, and we have built a society that is somewhat, you know, might ungenerously be described as a carrion pile. But there is apparently in us the capacity to evolve to this other form. And there is, as long as we're roving through exotic biological metaphors here, there is a phenomenon in biology called neoteny. Neoteny is the preservation of juvenile characteristics into adulthood. And we, as a primate species, exhibit advanced forms of neoteny. This is why we are hairless to adulthood. This is why our skull-to-body ratio remains infantile compared to other primates throughout life. It's why we require such a long period of physical upbringing. Well, there are certain animals that will remain in the juvenile stage their entire lifetime unless certain environmental parameters shift. And what I mean by that is, say you have a kind of salamander. Well, it exists as a kind of a tadpole its entire life, and for generations it can do this, living as a tadpole. But if the pool dries up, the organisms in the pool at that time suddenly discover that they have the capacity to develop lungs and crawl out onto the land. And they do, even though perhaps this hasn't been done in that neighborhood for generations. And I think we are sort of in that position. We have a capacity inside ourselves that we have not yet unfolded, and we may not for a while. When things really get nutty, part of the getting nutty is that we will discover present in our human population all the time were mutants of certain types that had no evolutionary advantage as long as bourgeois society and Judeo-Christian ethics were in place. But when that begins to shake and shimmer, then these mutant types will emerge to the fore. This is how evolution works, by the way, in animal populations. The mutants are always present, but they have no consequence unless the environmental parameters shift and give them then a special advantage. And I think being able to see hyperspatially is the special adaptive advantage that psychedelic plants confer upon the people who use them. It is literally, you see the world with different eyes, and it's going to make it possible for you to find your way through the future in a way that will be very difficult for people who are looking at the situation through the eyes of materialism, Newtonianism, positivism, and so forth. Yeah.
That's the question, I guess, that keeps coming up to me was, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I keep thinking that too.
Well, I keep saying, de-emphasize anxiety. Reassure people. You meet people who say, I'm really scared. I'm scared about my job. I'm scared about my relay. I'm scared. The answer is, don't worry. You don't know enough to worry. That's God's truth. Who do you think you are that you should worry, for crying out loud? It's a total waste of time. It presupposes such a knowledge of the situation that it is in fact a form of hubris. No, what you do is just pay your bills and, pack heat if you need to, and don't worry. That's all. Yes.
Someone just 2 days ago told me, don't worry, don't take it so seriously because none of us are going to get out of it alive.
Well, no, that's a more dismal conclusion. Worry is praying to the devil. That's great. Worry is betting against yourself. Wi Po Yang, a great Chinese Taoist who wrote many, many commentaries on the I Ching, he was asked at the end of his life what was his conclusion of a life of studying the I Ching. And he said, worry is preposterous. That was it. If we are serious about who we are and not ashamed of our dreams, then we have to build on the scale of solar systems. We have the imaginative power to be a galactarian civilization. It's just that we have a pissant control of energy at the moment. But if there's somebody out there who needs consulting, somebody who does have hyperlight drive and time travel but just doesn't know what to do with it, ask us. We are very creative. And I've tracked this very closely in the literature. And up until about 5 years ago, time travel definitely, if you were writing about that, you were a squirrel. Nobody was talking about that. And since then, Scientific American has devoted an entire issue to it. Nick Herbert, who I do not consider a squirrel, wrote an excellent book about it. There have been articles in Physical Review, and it's gone from it's completely impossible, don't even think of it, to, well, certain thought experiments can be imagined which do seem to imply. Well, that's how relativity got started, talking about trains passing each other at the speed of light and what would happen if. It's so hard to make people understand because we're in this new age environment of fishy thinking. But the entities inside the DMT trance are real entities. They're as real as you and I are. You would have trouble proving your own ontological validity if pressed by a skilled philosopher. So they're as real as we are. Well, this then has to be taken seriously. Questions like, where are they? Who are they? What do they know? Because they're intelligent. and we're intelligent, and we've been yapping about space people and all this malarkey. They are here. If flying saucers landed on the south lawn of the White House tomorrow, it wouldn't be as weird as what happens to you when you smoke DMT. It would just be a news story, something for NASA to take over. Chomsky would explain it to us, the linguistic side, I mean. But you personally can meet the alien anytime you want, and the culture can meet the alien anytime they want. Well, are these things here for no reason? Are we just sort of there on their trip and we're on our trip? Or have they come for us? Is there a message? Is there a purpose? And why does this seem so drenched in super technologies and intimations of time travel? I mean, are these things dead souls? Are they a future state of humanity that's come back 100 million years to the dawn ages of intelligence to observe, the discovery of starflight? Or what is happening? It needs to be looked at. And, I went into this very deeply with shamanism, but shamanism is a set of culturally sanctioned explanations for people who didn't know how to ask the kinds of questions we ask. And so you can only go so far with that. And eventually you realize, Jung won't help you, or Mircea Eliade, or no. You have to make sense of this on your own terms. It's very unexpected that this would happen. I always assumed I would be a aeronautical engineer or something like that. I never thought that the culture would turn 90 degrees and discover in, the biology of the planet an alien intelligence. I mean, that's what the 20th century will probably be remembered for, and very few of us can even articulate it to ourselves. In the way that the 15th century discovered the New World, the 20th century discovered the parallel continuum. It begins with Freud and noticing something about the fantasies of these Viennese housewives, and then Jung splicing in the myths, and then the surrealists and Iliad, and then the drug people come along, and Huxley, and so forth, until finally people say, as that wonderful line in Rosemary's Baby, "My God, this is really happening." Yes, what did you think? Over here.
I have a question. Lecture, from what I understand, and I'm not a mathematician, but they're using formulas based on double pyramids and tetrahedric.
Yeah. Well, I think, that these kinds of occult calculations, this is a legitimate way to proceed. This is how Kepler modeled the solar system, was by putting the Greek perfect mathematical forms inside each other. But I am really aware, from having worked 20 years on the time wave, how woolly it gets out there in the numbers as when you're looking for correlations, And there are a whole bunch of these things. There are the people in New Zealand with the world grid system. There's the whole Jose Arguelles cosmology. There's Ouspensky was an early one, In Search of the Miraculous. Yeats' book of Vision is a complex mathematical thing explaining the cosmos. And there seems to be something in us that we are systematizers. We produce systems, and these are integrated systems of means. And the only thing you can do is lay them before your fellow monkeys and see what goes on. And I usually am a reluctant participant. I'm not much fun when it comes to weird ideas because I just pour cold water on them. For instance, right now my mail is running pretty heavily toward people who want to inform me about and convert me to the works of Zecharia Sitchin, who, and this is a, do you know who I'm talking about? Well, this is a complex cosmology. It involves 5 or 6 books. It involves a lost planet which comes into the inner solar system every 35,000 years or so, which was responsible for Jesus and it's a whole thing. And people who I, up to that point, had considered sane, found it very interesting. And I was just, it was, you know, so I think the only thing you can, I am in this same position. I mean, someone could certainly react phobically to my thing. So I think what you have to say about these ideas is they just have to be dropped out of the nest, and you see what can fly and what can't. However, then here's a piece of advice which you may not need or want to hear, but this has worked for me. And it's not an orthodox piece of advice, but if you hear a claim that fascinates you or interests you, like a claim, well, just as an example, the face on Mars or the time wave or Zecharia Sitchin's thing, yes, you should read the person's book and you should think about it on that level. But what you should also do is try to find out as much about this person as possible. It's very hard for people to hide their pasts. And if it turns out that your particular revelator did some time in Tennessee for auto theft, or was last seen fleeing Germany with a valise of cash, then you know. And this was very effective for me with the crop circles. An investigation of the histories of the major personalities was a journey into, well, I can't even find words to describe it, but that's the thing to look at. Look at the people. Look at their lives, their credit histories, their bank accounts, and then judge their cosmogonic visions. Some people would probably say that's unfair, but in a sense it goes back to what I said a couple of days ago about aesthetics. You know, the revelation of the mystery, one thing is for sure, it will not be tacky. It won't be tasteless. You know, it won't be wearing sequins, for God's sake. It won't pass out 10% discount coupons. Sorry.
Will it charge at all?
Will it charge at all? Where I pulled out is I was at one of these expos, you know, that are around, and I toured the thing. And if you ever go to one of those things, they are horrendous. I mean, Moldavite suppositories and just the damnedest stuff. And I was making my way through the booths, the various therapies, channelings, and revelations, and this young woman in a short skirt rushed out and took me by the elbow, and she said, "Excuse me, sir, could I interest you in elective cosmetic surgery?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, how about the drawing for the Camaro?" I said, No. But that's all right. The marketplace has always been a noisy place.